Hello, everyone. This is Charm City Decoded. I'm your host, Sophia Turner. I welcome you all back to a new episode. I'm going to be talking about a little bit about a great woman who is the wife of a great man. And this great man had a recent birthday that passed on January the 15th of this year. And we celebrated him. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. And I know we talked a lot about all the things that he has done for our race, for this country, for just trying to create a peaceful environment, a loving environment, a godly environment, to give us equality, as far as black folks, trying to give us the things that every human being should be entitled to. It shouldn't be about status. It shouldn't be about race when it comes down to equality. It should just be about that we are deserving because we're living, we're human. So he fought for a lot of things, and he was recognized for it. So I want to also add to that conversation about this great woman who was his wife, Mrs. Coretta Scott King. I know we talk a lot about Dr. King a lot, but not so much about Coretta Scott King. And if it wasn't for Mrs. King, we wouldn't even be celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday as a federal holiday. She continued to fight where he ended because of his demise and I think we need to honor her as well as honor him. So I wanted to speak on a little bit about her. It makes me think of, I'm going to tell you about a fun fact first, before I even get into all of that. And this is some more history, black history. Because, as I said before, we are coming to Black History Month next month, in the month of February. So I want to give you a history fact. This history fact is about a Mr. Thomas W. Stewart, who was a African American inventor from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I didn't even know it was a Kalamazoo. When you think of that, it made me think of, I don't know, a Mary Poppins movie or something of that sort. But yes, he came from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and he patented a new type of mop on June the 11th of 1893. He invented a clamping mop that could wring the water out by the use of a lever. So I want to recognize him for Black History Month. A new name for me, to learn more about. And his name, as I said, was Mr. Thomas W. Stewart. And he invented the clamping mop June the 11th of 1893. So that's a fun fact to know a little bit about our history. This leads me into talking about a little bit about why it's important to also recognize Mrs. King. And I'm gonna tell you about a term that I want to discuss. This term is called schema. SCHEMA. And this is considered a technical term, and it's a representation of a plan or theory in the form of an outline or model. They say a schema of scientific reasoning, logic, a conception of what is common to all members of a class, a general or essential type or form. Now, you want to know why I'm talking about this word schema. SCHEMA. Now, like I said, it's an outline. You know, you can associate it with an outline. You ever had to draft a paper, and before you draft your paper, you have an outline of the center of it is the topic, and then around what surrounds to make this topic so so interesting. That's what schema is, and it's a and how it's in relation to what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the strong black woman. The strong black woman is associated with this outline, which is schema. And the outline is what I'm talking about is the cultural ideal. It's a cultural ideal. It's a race, gender, coping strategy that prescribes expectations of unyielding strength, independence, self-control, caregiving, repression, self-silencing, psychological invulnerability, and endurance despite. Now, as you know, being born black in this country, it comes with flags for us, meaning that we know that we're going to be treated differently than any other race, really, but especially our white counterparts. So we have endured so much, but being born black and a woman, Now, it's always been an imbalance when it comes down to men and women in this country, in this world, really. You know, men are held at a higher status than women in a lot of other countries. You know, some women are looked at as just a piece of property, someone to bear children and stay silent, do as their husband tell them to do. Well, black women was along in that category as well. You know, women in general wasn't given rights initially as the men were. You know, they barely wanted women to go to school, but they didn't want them to reach a higher education. They wanted them to, once they grown, get married and have children. And that's just the generalization when it comes down to women, right? And they couldn't vote when, you know, it's always been a struggle when it came down to women receiving equality, especially in this country. And black women had it even worse than any other race of women. And I know, and I spoke on this, I think, very briefly before, there is not a such thing as a color of people. We are humans. We are all the same when it comes down to that. It's just some has melanin on their skin of a darker tone than anyone else. You know, that's just how it is. We all are different shades, but we all are human beings. And we all are deserving of respect and love and kindness and forgiveness and all the other stuff that makes us human, right? We all have our faults. We all have our strong suits. I mean, I can go on and on, but I'm not here to talk about all those things. I'm getting off the topic, so I don't want to get off the topic. The reason why I broached this up, the strength of a black woman, and how it is in connection with this schema, which is an outline, a diagram to who we have been throughout the generations. We always been strong. We always have endured, and they prefer us to stay silent, have that silent strength. But one thing I could say about Miss Coretta Scott King, she was not a silent woman, but she still was very dignified, very respectful, very godly, very beautiful, very kind, very open to understand others, very intelligent. She was even skilled when it come down to music. I believe she wanted to sing classical music at one point in her life in her teenage years before she met Dr. King and married him. So she had so many different pieces of Mrs. Coretta Scott King. And I think we should dive a little deeper into who she was and who she is still today, even though she has passed on. And she passed on in 2006. So let's talk a little bit about who Coretta Scott King is and was. Hello, everyone out there. This is Charm City Decoded. I am your host, Sophina Turner. I welcome you all back to a new episode. I would like to talk about what's going to happen, what we're about to celebrate on Monday, which is Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. But it's not only about him that I'm going to be discussing. I want to also talk more about his number one supporter of what he did to help change what was going on back during Jim Crow times. He helped to change a lot of things to help African Americans in this country, for us to hopefully live better lives, have a chance at receiving what is our due as well, which is being able to live anywhere you want, go to school wherever you choose, and just be able to be accepted in a world that is so cold and unaccepting of people like us. So, and his number one supporter was his wife, Miss Coretta Scott King. But before we go into Miss Coretta Scott King, I'm going to give you a little synopsis about Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Martin Luther King Jr., he was born January 15th, 1929. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to tell you who he was, give you a little bit about who he was. He was an American Baptist minister. He was an activist. He was a political philosopher. And he also was a prominent leader in the civil rights movement. So those are the highlights of who he was and what he did when he was alive. He led, I'm going to tell you one example of what he did for us in leadership. He led the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, where that boycott lasted for 381 days. And he pushed for change, as far as changing of the laws when it come down to riding a bus in Montgomery, where it got to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court declared that Montgomery segregation laws were unconstitutional. So he fought. I'm going to tell you the perseverance of a people. when you think about it. Now, I know during those times back then, their blocks was not like our blocks because you have more road than more dirt roads than you have actual roads like how we have it now. We definitely have we have high rises and all that good stuff now, more so than what they ever had back in the 1950s and the 1960s, even further back. So they was walking miles and miles and miles to reach certain destinations, whether they was going to work, going to school, it did not matter. So they walked, these people, African American people who look like me, walked 381 days. No matter what, rain, snow, hail, sunshine, it didn't even matter. Just to show, just to prove a point that we got to do what we got to do to make sure that we receive, that we are recognized as human. We're humans just like y'all are. We pay our taxes just like you do. We are good standing citizens just like you are. So why, if I'm paying my 2 cents or my nickel to ride the bus just like everyone else, who are you to dictate where I can sit? So that fight was for equal justice. That fight was to be considered human. So, as I said, our people is a strong people. Humans can endure a lot. Humans can endure a whole lot. Really, really, we can. We really can. But it comes to a breaking point where we say enough is enough. Especially if we are being treated unjustly. Because we just happen to be of a darker shade than others who are the majority. You think because you are white that you have a right to say that I am less than, that I am unworthy, that I am nothing. I'm not even human. Like I'm your property. You can do as you want, speak as you want, talk to me, dictate to me as you want, and I'm supposed to just sit there and accept it. Well, back in 1955, they said, no, sir, not no more. So they stood up. They stood together. They was unified, and they did what they had to change the laws and the conditions that was happening in Montgomery, Alabama. So we need to learn from that. We need to understand that standing together makes a huge difference than standing apart. So that's one thing that we can learn from that if we don't learn anything else. So I'm going to go on to say that also Martin Luther King Jr., he received the Nobel Peace Prize on December 10th, 1964. And I'm going to tell you what this is. This award, this Nobel Peace Prize it is an award, and it is the reason for the definition of this award is fraternity between nations for the abolition or reduction of standing armies and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. So basically, they saying that anyone who who win or who is receiving this award is given because they is a person who has brought forth some form of change where they brought people together in a peaceful manner, whether it's nations, whether it's groups, where they created change in a positive to better the environment as a whole, to better the community, to better the nation. So therefore they are deserving of this great significant award. You know, all of us would like to be acknowledged for anything that we have done. You know, some people say no, I don't want to be acknowledged. But I think to some degree we all want some form of acknowledgement. It could be just in the form of someone saying thank you, and they mean it. Thank you for everything you have done. I appreciate it. Just that alone can go a long way for someone who has done the best they could to help bring forth some form of positive change. It don't matter whether it's in their little small community or in their household, you know, or it's just a stranger who you don't even know. They may, you know, help another person in some way. It could be an elderly person, someone who has some form of disability. It doesn't even matter. You know, we all here to serve each other, to, you know, be there for one another. So this award was a great award to be given, I guess you would say, to Martin Luther King Jr. So that's good that he was acknowledged in that way. You know, it really was. But he also, you know, but even for all the accolades that he may have received and all the invitations he has had, you know, to the White House to see the, you know, the President of the United States, and, you know, there are still some people who are very hateful and angry people, who are very sinful people who think that they have a right to take your life just because they don't agree with what it is you're doing out here to bring forth change. They don't agree with the change that you're trying to create that is helpful to the society. Some people just don't like change. So Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, fatally shot on April the 4th, 1968 at 6:01 p.m. at Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was declared dead at St. Joseph Hospital at 7:05. So he did a lot before he passed away. It was a short time that he lived on this earth, but he made such an imprint. He helped his people in so many different ways. And the strength of a woman, the love that a woman provides, can go a long way to help bring forth the change, because he had a wife who also was fighting for change in her way. They had 4 beautiful children together, and she raised these children. She was raising these children while he was out on the road doing what he needed to do to help bring forth change. That was important. That was one of grave importance when it comes down to you having someone at home who loves you and who's pushing you to keep going no matter what. No matter what adversity, no matter what tries to step in your way, you just keep going because you know what you're doing is the right thing. So it's good to have someone who's supporting you in that way. But the strength of a good woman is important too. To me, it's just as important as it is for the strength of a good man. Coretta Scott King, she also was a civil rights leader. She was an author. She was a widow. She come from good stock, meaning that she was born April 27th, 1927. Isn't that crazy? She was born April the 27th, 1927. I wonder if that was her, what they, we all have numbers out here that, winning numbers. I wonder if they were her winning number 2 and 7. But nonetheless. But she was born to parents who were entrepreneurs. And she didn't grow up easy. As you know, during this time, her childhood was marked with racial violence. Her home and her father's sawmill was burnt down when she was a teenager. But she didn't let that stop her. She didn't let that, prevent her from keep going. She was interested in music, so she studied music in Antioch. I believe it's Antioch College. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's where she attended. It was in Yellow Springs, Ohio. She also became politically involved in at the campus with the NAACP. She also was active in race relations. And she also was active with Civil Liberties Committee, as well as she also was active in various peace activities. When it comes down to peace, I guess that's what, drew them to each other, I would say. Because they was fighting for the same cause. They wanted the same end, meaning they wanted to be seen as human. They want to be accepted. They want to be able to receive all the equalities that any human should receive. That's equal to anyone else who's out here trying their best and doing their best. So she also continued studying in her music when she went to New England Conservatory in Boston. This is where she met Martin Luther King Jr., who was a doctoral student at the time. He was a doctoral student. And they married a year later in 1953. Then a year later after that, they moved to Montgomery, Alabama. And they say Montgomery, Alabama was the future center for civil rights, for the civil rights movement. And she definitely fought alongside her husband. Against any racial injustice. And she also openly criticized women women being excluded from the movement. She stated this in a new lady, I believe it was I'm not sure if it was a newspaper or not, but in January of 1966, she wrote, "Women have been the ones who have made it possible for the movement to be a mass movement." I'm going to read that again. Women have been the ones who have made it possible to be a mass, for the movement to be a mass movement. The men couldn't have done it by themselves. They needed these women also. So they should have been included in the movement. So she was definitely for women receiving, their rights too, to be able to be accepted. So it's funny when you think about that. Back in those times, women, females was always put on the back burner when it come down to them being accepted. Also, it's something when you're born black and you're born female. It's like, wow. And I'm not saying it's not hard for if you're born black as a man, because that can be deemed just as hard. But let's look at it when it comes down to voting rights. Men had all the rights. Women didn't have none of those rights. Women have to fight to be able to have their cast a vote. So they also can pick the right people who they think and deem right for political office. When it comes down to changing laws, why shouldn't they? They are part of the community. They the ones who are actually helping the community to grow and prosper in so many different ways. So why shouldn't they also be able to cast a vote? So she fought for that. Women have fought for that, and they finally achieved that. But I'm sure, so that's what she did back then. She fought for women to stop being excluded from the movement. So in 1962, at the age of 35 years old, she represented the activist group Women's Strike for Peace. What's the name of it, the group? And as you know, in 1968, her husband was assassinated. April 4th of 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. So she founded the King Center in 1968 in memory of her husband and to protect his legacy. To protect his legacy is what she did. So in 1969, she openly displayed disdain for the Vietnam War. And she was placed under FBI surveillance for several years. I don't mean no harm. FBI was nosy back then. They was real nosy, wasn't they? They all up in these black people's business. Wanted to know they want to listen in on their conversations, read their mail. They wanted to do a lot. Followed them everywhere they went. They thought they was a danger to the United States, huh? And all they wanted was just to be treated the same as anyone else who were not black. Why didn't they have the right? They had the right. They paying their tithes, they paying their taxes, they working hard out here being decent citizens just like anybody else. Why shouldn't they be treated fairly, huh? That was too much to ask for? So you had to put him under surveillance because you didn't agree with that? Isn't that something? That is something. But the same year of 1969, she published her memoirs, My Life with Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I'm going to have to buy that memoir. I'm going to have to see if I can find that memoir and purchase that because I would love to read it. In 1974, she was 47 years old. She fought to implement a national policy when it come down to full employment, equal economic opportunity, fair jobs, right? Fair wages. 1974. In 1978, at 51, she addressed her husband's death and allegations of the FBI's involvement. Some strong words, huh? She felt that they were so much under surveillance 24/7 for so long. Shouldn't they have known who was going to kill her husband? This is what she thought. All the surveillance, how you not know what was about to happen? Why didn't you prevent it? That's something right there, right? Yeah, it is. It is something. In the 1980s, she led lobbying campaign to establish Dr. King's birthday as a holiday. And it was signed into law in 1983. But it took effect 3 years later. So that means it took effect in 1986. Even though it was signed into law in 1983. Mrs. King was made a member of the MLK Federal Holiday Commission for life in 1989. In the same decade, she took an active role in the anti-apartheid movement. At 58, in 1985, she was arrested outside the South African embassy. Ooh. In the 1990s, she became a vocal advocate for gay rights. Throughout her life, Mrs. King spoke with many heads of state. And on January the 30th, 2006, Mrs. King died of cancer. I look up to Mrs. King, as I'm sure a lot of us do, especially us women who out here trying to make it, who want to receive we want to receive equal pay for equal work. We want to be able to live a freedom life where we're not scrutinized because who we choose to love. We want to be treated fairly, even though our skin is a shade darker. Because we have melanin on our skin. That's out of our control. This is how we was born. We can't change that. But we're being mistreated for it. Something that's out of our control. Definitely back then. And even to some degree in today's time as well. I just want everyone to recognize that we're going to recognize Martin Luther King Jr. birthday. And we want to say thank you for everything you've done for us, for our race, for this country. But I don't never ever want to leave out the strength and the love that his wife also contributed to helping us live a better life. So I want us to always acknowledge that. This is Charm City Decoded. I'm your host, Sophina Turner. And I bid you all a good day. Happy birthday, Martin Luther King Jr.